The Pediatric Lounge, a podcast taking you behind the door of the physician's lounge to get a deeper insight into just what docs are talking about today. From the clinically profound to the wonderfully routine and everything in between. Well, good morning, George. It's Tuesday morning again. How are you?
How are you doing today, Herb? Today we have another great physician that we need to elevate, Dr. Neil Bellovin. He's one of my business partners at RBK Pediatrics, and he's seen it all from the beginning of time until the modern day of medicine. And today he's going to talk to us a little bit about the anatomy of the private practice culture over time and the keys to success.
So for those of you who don't know Neil is the managing partner and CFO at RBK Pediatrics and Urgent Care, one of the largest independently private practices on Long Island. The organization started in the garage of the founding physician, Dr. Irwin Reichman, and now has expanded to multiple locations and 17 physicians. Their tagline is primary care when you want it, urgent care when you need it, services provided by physicians. Dr. Neil, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Neil, we always start by the same question of all of our guests. What motivated you to become a pediatrician?
Well, in medical school, generally the decision is whether you want to be a surgeon or a non-surgeon, and I'm not a surgeon type of person. So, then became pediatrics or internal medicine, and internal medicine, it just seemed that patients just never got better in the hospital that we were dealing with, and pediatrics was much more rewarding. The kids would get better, and I enjoyed that a lot more.
Oh, yeah. And you were with RBK from almost the very beginning. What was medicine when you started with the founding fathers of RBK?
Well, they actually started the practice in 1962 or so. I joined in 1987. I had been in the Air Force for 4 years and then joined the practice. And, what's very different, it was just the three founding people and myself. And I think two doctors up the road just retired suddenly. And so they needed, so there was a big influx of patients. So they hired me. And, things were a lot different. I came from the Air Force where nobody paid for medicine, and now you're joining a practice where people are paying. And I think back then, more people didn't have insurance, so there were a lot of more people that paid cash or had not great insurance, and they would get reimbursed. So so it was kind of important, like how much an office visit was, how much a throat culture was. Was very important to them.
I see. And was the culture back then of quote unquote the good old boys?
All right. Back then, there was a lot of people basically you have to pay your dues, and so we all worked hard. I mean, I was pre-Bell Commission, where we worked 100 hours a week as an intern. They all did that, and the philosophy, especially of the senior partner, was, I started the practice, and so we kind of, you never told me how to practice medicine, but it was kind of like there were things that they did that you would try to follow. Basically, if you didn't, the patient, it was 15 years between the last person and me. So patients were used to them practicing a certain way. So if I did things differently, it might not go over as well with the patients, and they might call one of the doctors and, kind of countermand what I was doing.
Were they supportive of you back then?
I would say they were supportive. They never Google pimped me and brought me in a room and said, "What is this rash?" Things like that. And obviously they wanted me to do well, but I just got the impression sometimes, like if I did something and the patient called, they would just say, "Oh, what he did wasn't really quite right, and then let's do it this way." But it was the patients and them were kind of all used to doing things a certain way. And so, I jumped into that.
And remember the progress notes that they used to have, that yellow piece of paper that had like 30 visits on it?
Right. It would say ROM, amoxil.
Yeah.
That was it. And that was it. Not much in terms of charting.
Yeah, I guess that's why they were able to see 40 patients a day, 50 patients a day. They didn't
And
have.
I wouldn't say it was like a mill like that. I mean, it was busier, especially like flu season would be crazy. There was much less flu shots. So when the flu hit, it was really rampant. Then we would, but otherwise they didn't try to overbook things. We would do what we had to do. But if you had to stay late, you stayed late. That was the philosophy.
That was the motto.
And was there a little bit of like bully, like it's all men, so I went to an all boys prep school, so being pushed around and people hazing you is kind of like every day in an all boys school. Was the culture of RBK like that when you joined?
It wasn't like I say, there was no like pimping, but there was a lot of, I would say, bullying more when trying to do a contract, and because like they started it, so they were very reluctant to hand the keys over, and so there was a lot of nickel and diming about how much I get paid. So there was kind of bullying like that, like they did it, and so you kind of have to pay your dues, and that kind of kept fostering itself.
Yeah, I don't think there was direct bullying, but I think it was an unspoken rule where the staff knew that he was the man, he was the boss, and you were just the newbie.
Yes,
I
yes.
remember once when I mean, he was already gone when I started working there. Or no, he was part time still, so he was out of the country a lot. We had three doctors that were sitting in a little room, and then the other room was empty, but it was his office.
Right. That's
So I
right.
said, I'm not going to stay in a crowded room. I'll walk over. And then the chief nurse comes over and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm sitting down. I'm going to do my stuff." "You can't do that because it's his office." I said, "Well, he's not here. He's out of the country, so I'm going to stay there."
Really, I never knew that.
Yeah, that's how the whole thing progressed, and we started moving into two offices, as opposed to five people in one office and the other one staying closed. It was bad for production.
That never happened to me because there was the two of us, and if Dr.
Yeah,
Brown was on one side, I would sit in his office.
yeah,
They never did that
yeah,
to me, but I guess it just perpetuated.
Yeah. And what do you believe are the key elements of a successful private practice culture?
Well, I think it's getting the right staff, and people that that can work together, which for the most part I think we do a good job of, and just setting the culture that like now, as I'm the senior guy, that the younger newer doctors, they come to me with questions about anything, schedule or this or that, and but also they have a rash, they have a kid, they'll ask me my advice, what they should do logistically, what's the best way to do it. And so I think you have to really foster that inclusion, and not being afraid to talk to me and ask questions.
right.
So you function much more like a teacher
In that regard, yes.
A
and
mentor.
a mentor or teacher. Is that rewarding? Because I would have to think that's very rewarding to have a hand in mentoring younger physicians.
Oh, very much so. I mean, that's how medicine is when you're a fourth year, third year, you learn the fourth year, which are the intern, the resident. So that's how it always is, and so I very much enjoy that. That's how we all kind of grew up.
Yeah. Um, how do you ensure that that culture remains healthy through 26 years in private practice?
Well, again, I think it's hiring the right people, and not having, like as George was saying, the nurse kick him out of the office. I mean, I think we all try to get along, and we're always available to them.
Yeah, I think it's actually not 26 years, Herb. It's 58 years of the practice.
But he's only been there for 26.
He's only been putting up with me for 26. He's been
Right.
there
So I
longer.
was there for 10 years, right before that. Yeah.
I think it's everybody's a friend. Okay, it's not it's me. I'm the top guy. I'm the top gun. Follow my rules. It's not like the military. Everybody's friends. You know.
I think back to them, and I would go to hospital, and I would talk about a doctor I met. Oh, he's not a good guy. They seem to not get along with other pediatricians at the hospitals we were with, and So there's a, very different mentality. Oh, these doctors, they steal patients from us. So it seemed like they didn't get along with a lot of them, which I didn't quite understand why. And
I think they were very competitive.
yeah, I guess, but there was enough. Look, it's a Long Island. There was
There's
plenty
plenty
of
of children. Maybe a
you
small
didn't
world, but
have
it's a
to.
Long Island.
You didn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
I find that the culture of RBK fascinating because most physician organizations suffer from too many big egos in the room,
Right.
and a lot of arguing and backstabbing and a lot of air sucking. And by air sucking, I mean there's always someone that gets up and talks and talks and talks and talks and talks, and 45 minutes have gone by and you haven't solved the problem. Um, uh, what is the success there? You guys just hire people that are the right fit from the beginning, and then mentor them, or you just hire young people and then mentor them. But it's
Well,
unusual. I mean, to get 10 doctors in a room to agree what time it is on the clock is
well,
almost
what I
impossible.
try to do, and George, I've had meetings occasionally where I say, even just to the partners, not to countermand another partner. I'll give an example. When we first started in our second office in Bayshore, the office manager there called me, asking me about some issue. I'm listening for about a minute, and then I realized that Dr. Riley, one of our other partners, was there. I said, wait a second, did you ask Dr. Riley? And she said, yes. So I said, you have your answer. Click. I'm not going to, I don't know what Riley told her, right or wrong. He made the decision. I'll talk to him later. If I disagree, I'll say, I disagree, let's talk about it. But I'm not going to go against him. She was fishing for a different answer, and I wouldn't let her do that. And I think our senior partners they would countermand each other all the time. I got the impression before I got there was a lot of that. And they managed to stay together, but I always would tell George and Jim, we have to stick together, find out if there was a decision, and then drop it, and then we can talk later. And I think that works out.
It keeps the team, together and strong, as opposed to, the ball being kicked around all over the place and nobody making a goal.
It's like
Mommy says no, ask daddy, but the nurses, you can't run a practice that way. Get fishing for the answer you want.
right. So it's like parenting 101.
That's right.
Mom and dad have to agree not to give dessert before supper
That's right.
That's
because
exactly it. That's
the
exactly it.
kid will go the kid will go to mom, to dad, then to grandma, and then to the uncle to see who will give them the answer they
That's
want.
right.
And you can't raise a child like that.
That's right.
Oh yeah, so that's a genius idea, but very insightful. I never thought about that. That's very key to practice that.
Yeah.
It's so easy to off the cuff because you're busy seeing patients. Just say, "Yeah, do this or that," and not ask the question.
Yeah, when you have a big group, it's very easy to end up with us and them, or boys and girls, or partners, employees. We try to get rid of that. And I think the best way we did it was with our recent renovation when we made that one big office in the Comac office, Neil.
Right. Right.
Everybody's in the same room.
Right. So then we bounce things off each
Yeah.
other. It's much more collegial, and so it's really working out.
And I know about everybody's kids' baseball game, birthday party. Sometimes I don't want to know, but you listen.
So there must have been a time where your culture faced a real challenge in the practice. What was that, and how did you manage it?
Oh, there was a lot of those.
Well, I think even when George was hired, because one of the doctors had retired somewhat suddenly. But I mean, he gave 6 months notice, but it was at an odd time of year. And I think it was probably because the three of them had some issues and he just decided to go. But the challenges are really keeping staffing. When we hired George, and then one of the other doctors right after we hired George said that he was leaving to go into academic medicine. And so now we're right after we hired George. Is there a couple of months, and we realize he's not a serial killer. He gets along, sees the patients. He's a hard worker. So we would usually go for like a 2-year contract, with a raise and then a bigger raise. And the other guy said to me, "Well, don't tell him that the other doctor's leaving, because then he'll hit us up for more money." I mean, $5,000. You know what it would have been. But I said, no, we're fine. We're something a long-term relationship. I don't think we should start it out dishonestly. So I told George that the other doctor was leaving, and the unintended consequence was he didn't like this doctor, and this doctor, we're not getting along. And if I hadn't told him, George might have actually left us. And so I think that honesty, you know, being honest and, you know, keeping things together really worked out, you know, for us. But that's kind of always the challenge, is finding the right staff. And like even then when he left, we were very short that winter. We had worked without a day off. Like there was one nurse practitioner who had gave birth, so she was out for 6 weeks. So we really killed ourselves in the winter. We hired George. All right, things are getting a little better. Then the other doctor decides to leave, and so and that's when we hired Dr. Riley. But that was the challenge, is making sure you have enough doctors, or you'll just burn yourself out. You know, we couldn't went through another winter like that. You know, so.
Yeah, I remember when we hired Dr. Riley. That guy was a real one of those academic-y kind of guys. He kept bothering me and checking and pimping me. What's this? What's that? What's the differential of this and that? Nonstop. And then I got to the point where I got angry and I said, listen, I am studying for the boards right now. At this moment in time, I know everything. So stop it. And he went away.
You know, and I never knew this. I felt
He used to drive me nuts. He used to drive me nuts.
You know,
Yeah,
I knew you had to practice medicine. It's just giving it, you know, tweaking things. You know, oh, this is a little better way to do it, but not.
No, he wanted to show that he was really smart.
Right.
That was the point. I'm the smartest guy in the room, so I'm going to beat you up a little bit. And then Dr. Riley came in. We were replacing him, and I was looking at another practice to develop to take over, but I wasn't ready for a practice yet. And then when I heard that he was leaving, Neil told me, I was like really, really happy. It's like, all right, this is good. We got rid of the problem. You know, and then I called Dr. Riley, who we were residents together, and he comes in, and it was like this really old rinky-dink office with white paneling, like somebody's grandma's basement. And he walks in, he says, "Ooh, this looks terrible." I said, "Yeah, it looks terrible, but it has potential." You know, the one guy that's a problem is gone. The other guy is going to retire. So it leaves Neil, who's pretty cool. And I was right. You know, and before the last of the three, he was actually really good, Mike.
Right.
So, you know, problem solved.
Well, and what role does physician leadership play in creating and maintaining a positive culture in the private practice?
Well, it's very important. It's kind of like we said, making sure that that they're not afraid to talk to us about any issues they're having, and like George says, we know about their private lives, so it just makes them feel much more comfortable. And if we do ask them, you know, if someone calls in sick, you know, they'll help us out, you know, and I do the schedule, and then, you know, so I'll pay them back later, but they feel we're all in it together, and they feel, oh, they don't necessarily want me to work extra. Like we all work a little extra, but it's like they're not going to say, oh, let one of the partners do it. All right, I'll pitch in, and then, you know, get paid back later.
Yeah, it's extremely important. I worked for in 1995. I worked for an emergency medicine group that had already about 150 physicians, and I was a director of their pediatric program and started their first PTR. And you know, things were so bad that they had all these rules. Like if you didn't show up to a shift, you had to forego $1,000 of your salary.
Well,
You know, that was the only way they could manage it. Everybody was paid by the hour, because I would tell George, "Hey, George, could you cover for me on Saturday? I can't make it to the ER." And George would say, "Yeah, sure, I'll go work." And then he said, "Could you, what day are you going to cover back for me, pay me back?" And people would say, "Well, I don't have time. I'm sorry." And so they said, "Okay, so stop that nonsense. You get paid for when you work. And if you don't work, you don't get paid." And all kinds of the senior partners had all kinds of games they played. You know, they would schedule all their administrative meetings in the hospital during times that they were working shifts. So they didn't have to come twice to the hospital. So they left the other partner alone in the ER. It was not, it really solidified that compassion and empathy in a practice and treating people fairly and being honest and having a team attitude goes a long way. Once you
Right.
lose that, you can't get it back.
Well, I think leadership, I always just believe in leadership as just working hard, doing the right thing. And they see me working hard, not being afraid to work. So then it trickles down to them. Like you said, your partners that would schedule, or the senior partners, they're not working. So everyone knows that. The younger people see that and they say, well, why should I work extra if they're working less? So they see me working hard, George working hard. Then when we ask them to do things, they do it. It's leadership by example.
That's
Yeah,
very important.
yeah, but with a lot of compassion and empathy too. Um, and what do you think are the biggest factors now contributing to the decline of private practices?
Well, it's very hard. I mean, a lot of it is, the insurance companies and, meeting measures. So we had to be computerized and that's a lot of money. Um, Staffing, competing with the hospitals, for staff. We have constantly nurses and secretaries leaving to go to Stony Brook and Northwell because, they can pay more money and not even more money. It's the better benefits, that it's hard for us to do. So it's just really keeping the staff is always, difficult. And that's and so that's why it's hard for a solo person to really, have to worry about staffing, the computer. So it's just very tempting for them to join Northwell, Stony Brook, Pro Health, all of that. Everything is done. And usually at the beginning it's good. They'll computerize them, they'll, fix up their office, but then, then they own you and you can't do everything you want to do like you used to. You're not your own person anymore.
We've had a lot of staff, nursing, medical assistant, secretaries leave us and go to the evil empire. They go there for a couple of months, and what happens? I get a call. They want to come back because the lifestyle is better in a private practice. We're more friendly, family oriented, kind of. And my manager came to me a couple of times and says, should we let her back? I said, absolutely, let her come back. Let her be an example. And we had about 5 or 6 of them that did that because we're in a big complex where there's the big university right next door. They go and then they all come back. It's never happened with physicians, but all our physicians that ever moved on for different social reasons, family, out of state kind of things.
Right.
Yeah, I've always thought the the real estate people, they have like Remax, and then every unit is a separate company that does its own business. And I've always often thought maybe that's the best model for primary care in the U.S. One or two big umbrellas that do help you coordinate all these technology and all these contracting, and but at the end of the day, you get to run your own business and your own way and take care of your patients. I think the way you really think is important.
Like franchising.
It's I can't even say it's franchising. They have like Remax has somebody that they that what are they called? There's a big guy like in Leesburg where I live. He has a contract with Remax, and then he then provides the office space and the meeting rooms and some of the training, and then under him or her are the realtors, and each realtor is his independent business. And so there's an infrastructure there that they have to all contribute to. But if you don't sell a house, nobody pays you a salary.
Yeah, but they're
Uh,
working on commission now.
yes, they work all on commission, but they're all independent business. So um, like Dr. Neil just said, I don't think you could. It's very difficult for for a solo practitioner today to manage all these things that are happening, and unless they join a coaching group or they're part of some other network that helps them see things differently, it's got to be overwhelming.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
almost like they give whatever percent, 20, 30% off the top to take all of that stuff. And then but in a way it is better because I know a lot of surgical practices, they break up because one guy, did 20 TNAs in a certain amount of time, the other guy did 15. How do you split the money? And so I think this historically, those type of practices, they always end up splitting up. But pediatrics is not as procedure based, it's just, seeing a similar amount of patients, which, we would all do, and splitting the call. So there's less, you know, so being equal partners kind of works out, whereas in other specialties, it doesn't. And that's why a lot of them just fall apart, because they feel, well, I'm working harder than this guy. And, so I don't want to deal with him anymore.
Yeah. Interesting thing is, in our organization, Neil is one of the faster physicians. I'm right after him, and we have other partners that are not as fast. At the end of the day, the amount of volume that everybody sees is almost roundabout the same, plus or minus a couple of hundred, which at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. Money-wise, everybody generates roundabout the same amount of income. Maybe Neil generates a little bit more, maybe I do, and the other guy does less. But the truth of the matter is, those other people, they do cases that are a little bit more, how would you say, Neil?
Well, first of all, time consuming
Time consuming, draining,
and draining.
that we're not good at. So they do that.
And I tell the nurses, look, I see, one of the doctors in with like 2 teenage girl physicals, and that's going to take longer. And so I say, look, if they have a sore throat and earache, see if you could shunt it over to me, because I know they're going to get backed up, and they appreciate it. And to me, I'm like Mussolini. I want the trains running on time, everything running smooth. So I have to see a couple extra patients, and then they get out on time, and the patient isn't waiting. The patient's happy, they're happy, everybody's happy.
Yeah, I guess the days of seeing 30, 40 ear infections, that just doesn't exist anymore. If I see an ear infection every other third day, it's a lot.
Yes, and but I hear a lot. You don't say the word, but I hear a lot through your conversation the word team. You're a team. You're a family.
Yes. Yeah.
If someone misses a pass, someone else is there to pick up the pass.
Exactly.
And you do it over and over again. And you find roles for each other. You don't all want to be quarterbacks. There's got to be a quarterback and somebody that catches the ball, and you develop strong relationships. So the quarterback doesn't even have to look; he knows where Neil's going to be when he throws that ball, and that makes for a really great team.
Correct. And if you notice, and I think that's why we don't have anybody's name on the bulletin on the board. RBK could be anything. Could be Rogel Bellovin, somebody else, but it's not. RBK was the name given to us by the computer company because Reichman, Brown, and Kaplan was too long, and it kind of stuck. And we never. I remember once where I said to one of the founders something, and they said to me, "As long as my name is on that board on the marquee, we're doing it my way."
Right.
So we got rid of names.
And Dr. Brown, one of the founders, he always said the practice is like the golden egg, the goose that laid the golden egg. The practice is the golden egg. So you have to protect the practice, protect the golden egg. And so meaning, they left, retired, but the practice went on, because we took it over and it flourished. And it didn't matter who was there. And he was right. There's a good practice. The patients are coming. So you just protect the practice and keep it going.
Right.
So how do you think this massive buyout of practices by private equity, and then we're seeing it more in pediatrics now. It hadn't been a trend in pediatrics, but now they're coming for pediatrics, and the hospitals buying private practices has affected the quality of care people get.
Well, what happens if we've lost a number to, Northwell and Stony Brook, some of our practitioners, and they'll give them better hours than we can do. They can give them better benefits. And, I guess some of them it's worked out. I mean, these are people who have no desire to, be a partner and manage a practice. So, so they're able to do it. And if they work less Saturdays, they're happy. They work less nights or whatever. That's something we all you know, we all work weekends, we work nights, so you know that's we have a different philosophy about things. But ultimately, we knew of another doctor who was in a big practice, bigger than ours, and I guess the senior people didn't really want to manage it and run it anymore, so they were bought out by Northwell, and now one of them that we know was now let go. Could be, they just realized they're older, they can probably get a resident much cheaper, and so they let them go. You're signing a contract for a number of years, whereas we don't have we're here. We don't. We're not gonna, if someone's falling, we're not going to let them go. It's very rare that we never really fired anybody. It's just what people leave, for greener pastures. And like George said, the employees tend to come back. The doctors generally don't, because of the whatever hours they're getting is usually more beneficial.
Well, most of the people that left us, Neil, they moved upstate. They moved to the city.
Yes. Yeah.
The city's a big thing. New York City.
Right.
If you're a single person, you want to stay in the city. You don't want to be in Long Island.
Right.
Closer to home. But, that's just the way it is. I mean, if your husband's getting a job somewhere upstate, what are you going to do?
Right. Well, way back in the 90s, we had hired a woman that was very good. And the reason she came to Long Island was her fiance had a job there. And he had a job at some tech magazine. And then, so 2 years later, he moved to Silicon Valley. And so she left. And that's now when we interview people, what are your ties to Long Island? So that we'd rather have somebody who's grew up in Queens or Brooklyn or Long Island and knows the area. Someone like that, I don't blame her, but it's just it's not good for us to hire someone and they leave in 2 years. We want people to stay and enjoy the home.
I remember when I interviewed with Neil, his question to me was, "Why do you want to come to Long Island?" And my answer was, "Heck, I grew up in Queens. Everything was cement city. I want to get a house with a pool in the backyard."
Yeah.
Tired.
Yeah. Right.
And what steps do you believe private practice physicians should take to maintain their independence and preserve the essence of private practice?
Well, this is what, George, we're doing, the independent collaboration. And, like we talked about, the hospitals can give better benefits. And so what George has started a group that we're with a bunch of private practitioners who are able, now we get better malpractice rates, better health care, and computerizing, meeting the measures, which again, for a solo person is very difficult and time consuming. It's almost, you need two people, one to see the patients, one to, do all that stuff. So now by collaborating, we're making it easier. I mean, I don't know, George would know better. I don't think there's a lot of these but there's enough of these, collaborations that it does seem to work, right? I mean, when you looked into it, certainly there were others that were working, and that's how you base.
Well, the collaboration is great because there's a lot of children in Long Island, and entities usually respond only to large volumes of people or things. So if you're a bunch of practices together with a lot of physicians and a lot of patient attribution, now you're a force. If you're a one-person shop with a couple of hundred patients, nobody's going to pay attention to you. So the companies and the vendors and things, they want to deal with one entity that's independent, that deals with a lot of smaller entities. You just trickle it down a little bit. I guess sort of like the IPAs in hospital systems. It's just if there's an independent face or an independent body, the culture just keeps to, keep perpetuating forward. And Neil, I correct you, I didn't start it. We all started it together.
Sure.
So
Well,
it wasn't me. It was not me.
You and Juan were the driving force.
Well, we led the project.
Right.
That's what we did. We didn't start it.
But everyone is involved. That's
correct. And that's the culture that you need to, we collectively, all the practices got together, not one person. Some people lead it more than others, but it's not like me started it. It's my thing. It's our thing. Very important.
Neil, how do you see private practice evolving in the future in response to all these challenges?
Well, I think that a lot of them are going to have to, collaborate, or it's going to be, very difficult. And I mean, even when I started, I said, I don't want to start my own thing. It's going to be very difficult. I mean, I respect the people who after me were able to start practices and flourish. But even then, I could see the handwriting on the wall. It's much better to, be with a group. And it's just very difficult now because you have to, just to start, you need a lot of money. You need a computer, you need it, and, knowing that, making, seeing patients initially, how do you pay for all this? And that's where like private equity comes in, and that's where the hospital. So it's very daunting for a person to, you know, start by themselves. And so I think a lot of people, I mean, I wouldn't blame some, they join us and then after a few years say, oh, I want to go on my own. I can respect that.
We've had that. We
Yeah,
actually helped them.
right, right.
We actually helped them and gave them advice on what to do and methods, and that works out good.
You know, at least they can, earn a living to start, maybe then have enough to then, start their own thing. And that's certainly fine. But I think you're right. It's going to be very difficult. And in the future, it's just getting harder and harder. And now I think with hospitalist jobs, a lot of, when you finish your residency, what are you most comfortable doing? Seeing a string of ear infections like I did when I started, or being in a hospital. They're very comfortable working in a hospital. So now, finding doctors, it's so much easier for them to stay and become a hospitalist. It's what they know.
Yet now when we hire doctors, they don't want to go to the hospital like we do.
Right? Which is funny. Yeah.
I don't know if they're uncomfortable, they don't know what to do. I mean, to go see a patient, a newborn. I mean, just going to the hospital to see their newborns. How many times have you heard, Neil, Dr. Neil is the first physician to ever examine you when you were born at the college physical.
Right.
There's no monetary value to that,
Right.
but the value is priceless.
It's important to the patients.
Yep.
Very important.
Yeah, I think from the perspective of the of the young pediatrician, one, it's a waste of time, and the bigger the city you live in, the more impossible it becomes to cover two hospitals.
Correct.
You could spend 4 hours just on the road, going from from your home to one hospital, then driving to the other hospital, then driving back to the office. You lost all morning, and people are like, "Geez, to see two newborns." And now people want to see me in the office, and they can't find an appointment.
You are correct on that, but every case it's an individual case. I mean, our offices are located very close to the hospital. You got to drive by the hospital to get to work.
Yeah,
It's simple as that. It's not like where you are, where you have to drive an hour to get to a place.
yeah,
We're
and
very
then
close.
It was
some of the
different back when RBK started. We had like 3 hospitals. There was another hospital in Suffolk that's since closed, and I think they went to Huntington. They might even had 4 for a while, because then it was building up the practice. You want to go to the hospital, to get babies. The more babies we get, you're building up your practice. But the newer doctors, they're just walking in, seeing our patients. So I guess they don't see the need to, go to the hospital and build things up.
Yeah, the same thing was true about covering the ER, right? It was a way to build your practice. And then after a while, people are like, well, all I get is Medicaid patients out of the ER, and calls at 2 or 3 in the morning, or people who don't have insurance. And then they don't want to pay for the visit when they come in for follow up and say liability. How do I get out of covering the ER?
That is true.
So the culture really changed. I know my orthopedic colleagues in town. Now the hospital has an orthopedic hospitalist that does all the trauma. They don't want any of those cases referred to them. They don't, they're high liability, often uninsured, MVAs, alcohol involved. It's just not what we do. And so the whole thing has changed quite a bit. Um, Dr. Neil, what advice would you give to someone who's considering starting a private practice, particularly in pediatrics today?
Well, I would tell them that it is going to be difficult. There will be, a lot of growing pains. And now that I see the independent collaboration, I would say that, try to get into something like that, you know, as early as you could. It'll help smooth things over. Um, But yeah, I think it's very hard, you know, and so I can understand, you know, I mean, if they want to do it, it's great, you know. We all most of us become doctors to be our own person, so we're in charge. And like I was in the military 4 years after residency, and really the doctors, we didn't really run the clinics. Like the nursing was run by the people there, the military folks, and you know, so we didn't have much say. I mean, I would do things to help the productivity of the office, and you know, which things that I can't believe. I would almost think, well, why weren't these done before? You know, and like, am I smarter than everyone who worked there before, or did I just care and, you know, just had a couple of ideas? And you know, the military's, you know, other people's money, so really nobody cares about it being, you know, working, you know, working smoothly, and you know, and productivity. So
That reminds me of a very, very endearing story that one of my very good friends, Sandy, is an internist, and her dad worked for Budweiser in California, big, big Catholic family, right? And one summer, her dad got her a job sweeping floors at the Budweiser factory. And so she swept the area she was responsible for, but she was pretty efficient. So she went to the next room. And when she went to the next room, the union boss person came over and said, Hoffman, what are you doing? She said, well, I saw this room's also dirty, so I'm going to clean it. She says, no, don't do that. The union rule says that you're supposed to do that room over there. You're done. You sit and wait until it needs to be swept again. You don't do any more work. That'll ruin the whole thing for us. And, you know, that's the problem when you get to be that mindset of a big organization where it's not my responsibility. I'm hired to see 20 patients a day. I saw my 20th patient. I'm going to go into my office and or my cubicle and, you know, do other stuff till it's 5 o'clock to leave because I'm only hired to see 20 patients a day. I don't see one more. And if they can't deliver the 20, it is not my problem. And that is, I think, there's no empathy in there. You don't, you forget that you're there to take care of the patient, not to meet the goals of the administrator.
Right. I remember one day years ago, I wasn't a partner yet, and Neil came up to me and said, "This is like eye opening." He was out of state. He was leaving for the weekend. He was on vacation or leaving for the weekend. The other partners were also leaving for the weekend, out of state. And he came up and said, "George, everybody's going to be out of state. You are in charge of RBK and what happens, and make sure you manage the ship." I said, "Wow, these guys put that much trust in me to watch the shop while they're out of state. What if something happens?" I didn't ask for more money. I just thought it was like an honor to have that given to me. Today, oh, give me more money. I'll watch the ship, you
Or
know,
they'll just say, no,
or just say no.
no, I can't do that. You know, who do I call? Or
Yeah.
I don't want that responsibility.
Yeah. No, they said you can call if there's any question, any problems, but it should be okay. Just manage and be a doctor.
but I
Yeah.
knew he would be fine with it too.
Yeah.
You know, it's knowing, you know, the people that you're working with.
And finally, what excites you the most about the future of private pediatric medicine?
Well, I'm actually going to be semi-retired soon, so
But he's still working.
I'll still be working. But no, but it's just private practice. Like I said, we all, you know, we want to make our own decisions, and we're still able to do that. And I think that's what's good about private practice. We're able to see patients, to do what, you know, we want, how we want to practice medicine, and just take it from there.
Yeah. Herb, you see it in the coaching classes that you do. I mean, you see the fire in their eyes. They want to learn. They need people to teach them. And I think private practice and solo and all that, it's coming back. It's a new thing. It's every 10 years, 15 years that these cycles go. And I think most of the people are starting to look back into private practice and having their own little shops, but working with other practices to stay afloat. And because too much consolidation of systems and hospitals and private equity. Heck, how many times were we approached to be bought out by private equity, Neil?
Right.
if we would have taken those deals, Neil would have been long gone. Dr. Riley and myself would have been on the chopping block probably a few years after him. Maybe Dr. Nick may have been, he's also a little bit too advanced. He may have been the director, medical director of the organization now. Maybe. But we would have all been done. What would we do now, Neil?
I don't know. We'd be
You
working
would
for
have
somebody,
you would have started another practice. That's Judah.
Probably. That's usually what happens.
But,
They
but
started another practice.
and so Chip Hart says that, the biggest growth in their business, and, providing services to pediatricians is on physicians that are leaving a big system and starting their own practices. And what I see the shift in our coaching class is that these young women that are starting these practices are passionate about a certain thing, a certain way of giving care. And they are not allowed to express that passion in a big organization. So you guys, for example, I know that Jim and Nick like a lot of the behavioral health, while the two of you like more the infectious disease. But the ability to spend time with the patient and treat their ADD well is what brings you joy. It's not the dollars you make. At the end of the day, the dollars are needed to pay for stuff. But the ability to do what
Did we lose him?
I can't hear.
We lost you, Herb.
you lost me.
There we go. You're back.
I'm back.
back.
Okay. All right. So
But
sorry.
I think, but you make a good point. I think it's hard to start a practice, and let's say they're interested in, teaching mothers how to breastfeed. These are things that are time consuming. They're important, for the patient care. But it's, you can't be spending a half hour, an hour when you're at your own practice. You're not going to get paid adequately, to run the practice. Even like say the money isn't the most important thing, but you can't pay your nurses, your computer, just seeing a few patients a day. That's really the challenge.
So back to that old saying, Herb, if you do good medicine, the money will follow. If you follow the money, you'll never do good medicine. Hospitals, that's what they do now. They follow the money.
Yeah, they've always done that. Once they stop being owned by physicians and being charity institutions, that's how most hospitals started, right? It was a group of physicians saying we need somewhere to put the kids with with a high fever for 2 days and the dehydrated kid. And, they would all either fundraise or own the hospital, and they would run it like a private office. They wanted high quality care and people to be treated right first.
I think the hospitals now, like since COVID, a lot of doctors don't go to the hospital anymore and see the newborns, see the kids that are admitted, so they have hospitalists. And the hospital's obviously very happy with that. We still go in, and probably half of them, but a lot of them don't. And that makes the hospitals happy. It gives them more, more patients, more income.
And more control. More control. The private physician will complain about things being not done properly for their patient. The employee physician doesn't complain because they don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
They want to get along with the boss, so the boss can give them their 5% pay raise and keep them employed and their benefits going.
Correct.
So what else have I not asked you that you think is an important lesson for especially pediatricians starting out today?
Anything else? I think it's now, like you say, with probably the new pediatricians, they have to really talk to the employed physicians at the hospital and see, if they're happy or not. Like we don't really know, but I think when you're starting out, I think they should, talk to people like us, talk to employed physicians and see, what would suit them better.
Yeah. Problem I think is that the big health systems are teaching all young physicians that there is no jobs outside of the health system.
Well, that's true.
You better learn to work within the health system because that's the only place you're going to be employed.
Well, they have a captive audience that they're as residents, so
yeah,
they can indoctrinate them.
Yes, yes, they do that every day.
Yep. We have a fair share of resumes coming. People
Right.
looking into
Yeah.
private practice, and unfortunately, what happens is a lot of these kids they have student loans,
Yes.
Yeah.
and you have to work for a system or, I could never understand why the family health center down the road from us is a qualified loan forgiveness area. 1 mile away, we service the same area, yet we are a private institution and we cannot get loan forgiveness for these students. We service the same people and we probably do a better job than they do.
We used to be able,
I know there was a loophole or something.
Something
I don't know what that was, but it's no longer.
changed.
So whatever, we'll see. That's the new game, the new future. We'll figure that one out too.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Well, it's wonderful. I admire your culture and what you've done with RBK. It's just every time I talk to one of the partners, it's very rewarding. So I wish you very well in your half retirement.
Thank you.
Hope it's enjoyable and full health.
Hope so.
All right, Dr. Neal. Thank you. I'll see you in the office, and put in your request for when you want off from the office. I'm doing the schedule.
Very fun.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Thank you for listening. This has been a production of the Pediatric Lounge. On the show notes, you will find links to our co-host and other important notes, as well as a timetable of the topics discussed today. Don't forget to follow us on social media and subscribe to wherever you listen to your podcast. Leave us a great review, as it helps us greatly. In the meantime, we will see you next week. The Pediatric Lounge. The conversations are not intended as medical advice, and the opinions expressed are solely those of the host and the guest.